All right. All right, here we go. So, I think we are live now. I'm super excited. Welcome, everybody who is logging on. Let me just make sure. Okay, yes, we are live. Welcome, everybody, for joining. Let me just take this out of the way here and get ready. All right, great. So, welcome, guys, to Resilience is Your Superpower, my new YouTube series for the month of April. I'm super excited to have you all here live. And just so you know, my name is Mio Santana. I'm the owner and founder of Divine Journey, a transformational program. And I'm also the creator of Resilience, self-love group coaching program for women. And for the whole month of April, we're going to be meeting here on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. and on Wednesdays and Fridays at 5 p.m. to talk about resilience. And so we're celebrating the relaunch of my self-love program. And we are also coming up on my 3-year anniversary of my business. So I wanted to make this really special and bring together amazing, beautiful women who I see every day thriving and creating the life of their dreams. And I want to know how they got there and how they access their resilience to get there. And so today we brought together a beautiful woman, amazing soul. Her name is Ilona Pamplona. She is not only multilingual and multicultural, but she's also solution driven and heart centered. She is a self compassion coach and a clarity coach who guides bold, courageous women through a wide spectrum of emotions to access and experience self-compassion. So it's so perfect that she's my first guest on this series because she just really embodies what it is to love yourself and to thrive as a woman and to really take yourself to the next level by using self-compassion. So Ilona, would you like to say a few words about yourself and kind of introduce yourself to the crowd?
Oh my goodness, I'm so honored to be here with you, Mio. You are such an inspiration to all of the people whose lives you touch, and just, you did a great job of introing me, and my work does focus around self-compassion. These days it's also very much astrology and oracle card infused, so I believe in a little bit of the magic being able to support us in this life to really access the self-compassion, the resilience, the accountability, and all of the things that we get to stretch ourselves into in this lifetime. So I believe that there's a beautiful mix of being here and growing as a human being and using all the beautiful spiritual and personal tools that we're given in this lifetime.
Beautiful. So, with Alona, we're going to dive into what is resilience and how she's accessed it in her life. So, for me, the reason why the name resilience came to me, and the reason why I named the program Resilience, is because when I've done a lot of soul searching and a lot of like personality tests, and any quiz you could imagine, I've done it in my past to find out who I am, to learn the real deep side of myself and what I'm about. And so whenever I've asked people around me, people I love, friends, family, how would they describe me? They've always said the word resilient. They've always said, Mio, you're resilient. You're one of the people I know that just can make, lemonade out of lemons and just gets out of a hole when she needs to, and is just resilient. And that always stuck to me. And then when we were looking for the name of the program, I realized that every single woman that has done the program to date has the quality of resilience, is a resilient woman. So it just clicked to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the name of the program, Resilience. It takes a certain quality of resilience to go through everything we've gone through in our lives in today's day and age, with all the things that we're up against, the technology, the different progressions of the patriarchal movement, and all the different things that we've experienced through our lives. We it, it takes a special kind of woman to be resilient and to overcome these things. And so it's kind of a tribute to that. It's a tribute to women, and it's a call for to bring women forth who might be feeling a little down right now, who might be searching for their resilience, and can find inspiration in these conversations. So it's a little fireside chat here with my dear friend Ilona. And resilience is really great. It's really interesting because people talk about it a lot, but when you really narrow it down, it really comes down to the person's ability to handle stress, the person's ability to handle failure, to handle rejection, to handle criticism, and to handle life in general. And so resilient people tend to be the ones that know that stress happens, but they learned how to expect it and how to manage it and how to overcome it. And so, Ilona, what's your take on resilience? If you want to talk a little bit about how you see resilience and you
Oh,
define it.
well, I just wrote down what you said. Stress happens, like things happen. And my take on resilience. So first of all, what I feel compelled to start off with this theme is I focus a lot when I speak to clients or when I'm on social media on like the spirit of words, like even the words that we're using in our life have an impact. So just the word resilience alone comes from Latin resalire, which means to jump back. And so the connotation that the original etymology of the word resilience gives us is this elasticity, this stretchiness, right? And so what happens with stress is that a lot of us go into like sympathetic nervous system breakdown. Like we fight, we flight, we freeze, we fawn, we do all
Oh,
these
yeah.
things, right? And that when we do not check our relationship to stress, we get to a point where we break. And what resilience really gives us is the ability to allow those stressful experiences to stretch us out, to allow us to see that we can do hard things, and that the hard things are not going to kill us, that the hard things are not going to break us, that the hard things are not the end of us, because there's a there's so much going on that it feels like we can't take anymore. And while we shouldn't be at this level of stress, resilience is what allows us to see how much we're capable of. That's what comes up for me.
Totally, totally. And then when you feel like you can't take anymore, you find it somewhere within you. You like go down into your belly and just find the courage and the strength, and you just push through. And when you think you don't have enough, you don't have any more strength, you find it in you anyway, and you move forward. And so it's so beautiful because it's like I don't think there's an end to resilience,
No, no,
right?
no. It's like glass ceilings. We're the ones who put them on there.
Exactly, exactly. So resilience is like you said, it's like this muscle that we can expand and continue expanding. And when we don't apply self-care, self-compassion, self-love, that's when we stretch the band-aid too much and it breaks. Because you can be resilient and you can burn yourself out, and you can, literally pop the the virtual, rubber band, if you will, and burn yourself out and want to give up and be like, oh, you know what, this is too much, I can't do it. But when you turn around and you start practicing self-compassion for yourself, self-love for yourself, self-care, it just completely turn it on its head. And so I want to get into, because there's something that also goes with resilience. It's like probably the first cousin of resilience, which is grit. Grit. And the qualities that embody grit are courage, conscientiousness, and endurance.
Hmm.
And so I wouldn't even say it's the first cousin of resilience. I would say grit is like the child of resilience. It's like so much a part of resilience, Grit is like goes hand in hand with resilience. And so to have courage, to be conscientious, and to have endurance. And all of that through our so-called failures, the things that we tend to feel like we're failing at, or that we have failed at before. No one likes to talk about failures or their failures, you know? But why is that really? Why are failures such a touchy subject? And so I wanted to start off with the elephant in the room, which is failure. And I wanted to talk to you about what have been some of your failures in your life, and what have those failures meant for you in your journey.
Oh gosh. I mean, this is such a great question, because I've gotten to the point of self-awareness where I'm like, I don't see. So I think, so before we start, I feel like failure, the reason why failure is so difficult is because we identify as the failure rather than we had an experience of failure. And
Yes.
so like this idea of like, oh, like, okay, like I got into really bad credit card debt, right? Like really bad credit card debt. And so a lot of people would be like, I'm so embarrassed, like I can't talk about that. Like, this is shameful. And the experience is I am bad. not that these circumstances got out of control and I did something that external to me that can always be fixed. And so I think, you know, failure is a, people avoid failure and avoid talking about failure because of the sense of personification of the failure. And so, I mean, my immediate one is like, you know, and you and I have talked about this, is like, I have a money story that goes back several generations on both sides of my family. And so like, for me, I felt like me not being able to, for a very long time, manage my finances was a failure. And it would keep me from showing up into spaces, you know, interacting with certain people, because I felt like that certain people were above me because they had their money together. Like, I have friends who have investments and stocks and homes and children. I'm like, I'm ready to like, I'm like ready at the face. I'm like, oh, I'm starting to like actually pay off debt and like save some money, like, woo. And so, you know, that, like, for me, that failure was like, it was an experience of separation, when it wasn't really an experience to create separation. It should have really been like an opportunity to say, hey, I see you doing what I've not been able to do, but I've been too ashamed to talk about it. And so I'd love to hear what you're doing. And so a lot of us hide ourselves when failure is there, which is an aspect of self-compassion. So the reason I always led, so even though I'm more of an astrology informed life coach, self-compassion will always be at the core of my work, because there's a framework. And part of the framework of self-compassion is, are you going to isolate, or are you going to realize this is a shared human experience? So you may have friends that are great with money, but you might have some other friends that also really suck, and you can band together and help each other get out of the hole,
I
or
love that.
create solutions and strategies,
I
and
love
not judge yourself in that space.
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you said that. I love that you just said that, because my follow-up question to that was, what was the biggest thing that opened up for you as a result of going through that failure? And you were just touching on how you opened up to people who had accomplished something that you wanted to accomplish. So tell us about that.
Oh yeah, you know, I got to the point, well, it's so funny because I had a very close friend for a very long time who would always be like, you need to get your money. Like, there was a judge, you know, when you're younger, you judge yourself, and friends have a more, sometimes not compassionate way of approach, not because they're not nice or they're not friendly, they just don't know another way of approaching. And this one friend would always be like, you need to fix, you need to get your money in order, you need to get a money in order. And I'd be like, great, can you show me how? I don't know, like, I've not been taught this, because we're not taught finances in school. And thank goodness for like people like in our network, Les Comadres, who do things like that. But they wouldn't help me. They'd be like, you need to figure this out, here's a book, read it on your own. And I'm like, I'm asking you. And so I spent time hiding, because that one very close friend didn't have the tools to help me see and show me. But then when I finally got to the point where I'm like, this can't go on, I was able to begin to open up and share. And the more I shared with friends who I didn't even know what their circumstances were. Like, there was a day where I just, like, it was like a bad day, and someone's like, what's happening? I'm like, well, you know what? I'm an open book. I'm having, like, I got into a pickle with a credit card company a while ago, and this friend was like, oh, I've been there before too, and I'm out of it now. And it took us like X amount of years, but we did this and we did that. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that that's an option. Because when you don't talk about it, that means you're also not looking for solutions. You're not looking for opportunities. And having that compassionate ear and relatability reminds you that it's not the worst thing, and that the worst case scenario that you're creating in your mind is not the only option for your experience.
Oh, beautiful. So well said. Guys, if you're listening, like, write that down, because that was a gem right there. But Ilona, I want to kind of dive into you personally, your life, your trajectory, like what got you to where you are today, your journey. If you want to embellish for us a little bit on, what it took for you to get here, and what inspired you to do what you're doing today. You're an amazing coach, you're an
Thank
amazing
you.
woman. So what got you to where you are?
Well, funny story. I mean, it does have to do with a path of resilience. I come from, you know, immigrant parents, so I'm first generation, where education was like, you weren't not going to go to college in our family, right? Although my sister didn't, but that's a story for another day. But the older, like my brother and I, were like, in college, we were really studious, we were really serious about what we were learning. And I had a pretty, like, my parents were great parents. I mean, everyone's parents can mess them up, but like, my parents were really good. And my education was great. And like I had a lot of magic and amazing things happen to me in this lifetime. And then I got into the workplace. You know, there's resilience is going to show up for people in different spaces. For some people it could be parents, for some people, or family, for some people it could be work, for some people it could be yourself, right? Like your own self and the way you relate to yourself. For me, it ended up being the workplace that like was my test of resilience and my path to how I got to where I am now. Because I had a good job, and you know, you learn to be a good worker bee. And I got to a place where I had a job that had a mentally and verbally abusive employer who, and it wasn't just me, it was to other people, but there was a period of time where it really focused on me. And I, you know, at the time I was really young. I was 25 with a mortgage, with a car payment. And so, you know, there's this thought of like, I can't leave my job. I've got all these bills to pay. I have to suck it up. I have to deal with it. And so we were talking about the stress happens. And so the stress was happening, but I never had it to that degree where it was specifically directed to me. It was intentionally to make me break. It was intentionally to make me feel not well. It was directly intentional for me to question myself, because that's the other thing that resilience offers us. It offers us a connection to our own self, our own voice, and our own intuition. Because when you are not stretched outside of your comfort zone, then you trust everything and you go on autopilot because life has been a certain way and it was never different. And so this experience made me really question, like, is this what I really want to do for the rest of my life? Is this who I really want to be? Is this the type of experience I want to spend my entire human experiences? I mean, I would even say that if it weren't for that workplace abuse situation, I wouldn't even have fully opened up to the spiritual experiences that I brought into my life that are now integral to who I am and the work that I do. And because I was living a very, you know, I call it the lather, rinse, repeat life, right? The shampoo bottle says lather, rinse, repeat. Wake up, have breakfast, go to work, go home, eat, sleep, repeat, day after day.
Pay your bills, go to sleep. Yeah.
And up until being in the workplace, like I said, I experienced a lot of magic. Like I randomly met a lot of celebrities. I won trips to places. Like I made friends with amazing people. I did a lot of things before the workplace. And at the workplace, I was like, this is not the template of the life that I want. And I'll never forget, we were talking about resilience and how you're going to get to a point that you think you're going to break. And I remember there was a stretch, and I was only at the job for a short amount of time. And right in the middle of, like, actually towards the end of it, I began to think, I'm going to break. And there are going to be things that you think are breaking you, but they're not breaking you. They're stretching you. Because I'll never forget, I was waking up day after day for about a week. And I was waking up at around 3 a.m. And when I was waking up, there were already tears in my eyes from the suffering that this experience was bringing me. So it wasn't like I woke up, I was sad and crying. It's like I was so sad that my sadness woke me up.
Wow.
And here's an interesting thing too, when we talk about resilience, like the idea of like also cultural implications. Like I come from a Latin background, and Latin families don't say, hey, maybe you should see a therapist, right? Or you should see a counselor or something, right? It's always like, you know, no se preocupe, like just párese, get up and keep on going. You can do this.
Yeah.
And I had a boyfriend at the time who was like, it's just a job, just keep on going, pay your bills. And I thought, no, this doesn't feel right. And I remember calling out of work, to which the employer was mad. And I didn't know who to call. So I called my medical doctor and I was like, I need an appointment because I don't feel well. Because I was so sad. Like I was overwhelmed with sadness, and they were so compassionate. They also happened to be more of a naturopathic doctor. They had like holistic background as well as traditional medical backgrounds. And they're like, oh, you came to the wrong doctor, but let me help you. When I said, well, you know, oh, I'm here because I'm really sad and I don't know what to do. He's like, this isn't the doctor, but you can get help. And that's the access, right? I think the other thing about resilience is when we're resilient, we do what we can, but we also know we don't have to do it alone. The lone wolfing aspect of life is what will actually allow the break,
Yes.
which will actually create us to break down to a place we shouldn't go. Life is a team sport. And had I not said, tag, I can't do this, I wouldn't have had a compassionate human being say, oh, let's get you to a therapist so that you can figure out what's happening. And that through that, I was out of that job within, I think, not even a month. Because when you are in the dark night of that soul and you're in, there's a lot of, this is where self-compassion in the framework, the academic framework is, there's over-identification with the problem, right? I was
Become one
like,
with the problem instead of looking at it as something that could have a solution.
right, my life
Define.
was, yeah, my life was the problem. Like I couldn't even go out with friends without like being in the experience of the trauma of the abuse.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to separate like that's work and this is life. And so to come full circle, how did I get here is that I remember leaving that job and thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but one day I'm going to make sure that other women, because for me it was, there was a gender thing happening, but that, and this is not to say that this is going to be everyone's story, but for me, my specific story made me empowered to help women and women of color to not allow their employers or situations in their life to keep them from being who they get to be and moving forward.
Mm. Yes.
And at the time I didn't know that there was an industry called coaching, because this is now well over a decade, because yes, I'm not a spring chicken, but yeah, back in the day, like I didn't know coaching was a career. And why resilience is so important is because had I stayed in that job, I would have broken. I would have been in a place I don't belong, because I actually didn't belong in that industry. And I wouldn't be in a place where I'm actually helping clients. Like I've helped clients get out of toxic living spaces, make money beyond their wildest dreams, leave their full-time jobs, and who are feeling fulfilled and seeing magical synchronicities in their life. But it took me breaking to show people it's possible. And actually it took my path of resilience to show women, and actually people, because I've had some male clients, to show them there's more, there's other ways we can do it differently, and it doesn't have to hurt.
Exactly. Exactly. Amazing. Wow. God, the way you broke that down is just so perfect. And how that, what so-called failure, that thing that you said, oh my God, I'm failing in this career, this thing that's paying my mortgage, it's paying my car, and you were younger. So imagine you're starting out and you're thinking, this defines me, this is me. And all of a sudden you're failing in that, but your instinct, your intuition was like speaking to you. It was like waking you up out of your sleep to tell you that this was not a good fit for you, that you did not belong here. And then what ended up happening out of that failure, a seed was planted.
Yes, yes,
Exactly.
yes.
You had the wherewithal, maybe not even knowing, because sometimes we have wherewithal that we're not even consciously aware that we're having it, but something inside is telling you, one day I'm going to help women not have to suffer through this. It was like an alignment that occurred for you. It was like you knew, you didn't know how, you didn't know what it looked like, but oftentimes we don't know what it's going to look like, but we know that the intention is there. And when
Yeah.
the intention is there, that's all we need to move us forward. And so that seed was planted. And so then tell us about how you took that and just began continue to roll with it and get to where you are now. And actually
Great
also,
question.
like, describe what you do now.
Great. And so actually it's so interesting because then the next job I took was the same industry, but it was a safer position. It was a very like, it wasn't corporate, but it had that more of a corporate feel. It had, and it wasn't completely abusive, but it was still, there were moments of me being put down. And I know that I hadn't learned my lesson fully because I was there for a longer period of time. And towards the end, I was once again disempowered. It was a very male oriented faculty and staff and like location. And I found that as a woman, the only women who were really in power were never fully felt empowered, and always felt subjected to the patriarchal standpoint of the employer. And I didn't even have, even though I had a directorship position, I had to report to another director who was technically my equal, and I didn't get a budget. And I'm like, why is this happening again? Why don't I feel like I'm able to break through? And I remember there was like a corporate, or like an organizational town hall, and there were reports on my aspect of work, but no one had ever asked me. And I was like, they weren't using my name, and I was being put down. And I'm like, there was this part of me, I'm like, language is important, communication is important. Like, this didn't have to go down this way, but they're choosing not to use their words, or they're choosing not to build bridges to create better outcomes. And I remember, like, all my colleagues were all sitting in a room, and everyone's looking at me like embarrassed for me. And I remember thinking, I've been through workplace abuse. This isn't going to break me. This is not cool. This is very off-putting, but this is not my breaking point. Like, this is bad, but it's not the worst. And from there, I chose to move to another position. But when I moved to the other position, I made it an intentional point to start my master's in coaching.
Wow.
So in the second position, where it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good, I started a certificate in coaching. And then when I was like, okay, I'm out of here, I'm doing a master's in coaching, I'm going to go all in. And so now, even though I have a master's in health and wellness coaching with a concentration in integrative wellness practices, which is a fancy way of saying mindfulness, I use the coaching tools and methodologies, plus some of the astrology informed, aspects to help clients really figure out their purpose. Because all this journey of resilience made me realize that when you are not clear on your soul's purpose, we all have a purpose, and our purpose is not going to a job and collecting a paycheck. That is an outcome that is a result of living your purpose, but is not the purpose. When you get clear on your purpose, you actually find yourself being able to be resilient. You can go through discomforts because you go, it doesn't matter that this is difficult, because I'm in my purpose, and I can use my purpose as a fuel to drive me forward. And so that's how I got from there to another moment of difficulty, but not letting it impact me, because it could have. There were people who were so upset by things like that at that workplace that they left sporadically. They got fired, or they created ruckus to be fired. I'm like, I don't need to get fired, and I don't need to leave before it's the right opportunity, because I learned, like you said, stress happens, and we can be in the stress, we can allow it to stretch us so that we can get to our next level of growth. And that's what I did.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness. Yes. What a powerful story. Absolutely. And, you pointed to something a little earlier in your story, that you talked about asking for help.
Mm.
And it's funny because that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, which is like, those of us who have gotten to where we are, we've gone through, who knows what we've gone through to get here, but we had to take the bull by the horns to get to where we are. We had to, get into control and like really just make things happen. And sometimes that's a lonely path. And
Yeah.
sometimes you feel like for it to get done right, you have to do it yourself. And you get into that zone of like, I have to do things on my own. I'm alone. I'm not the only one on this path. And so, asking for help becomes like this foreign thing, like, oh, I can't ask anybody for help, or, oh, it's embarrassing to ask for help, or, oh, they're not going to understand me, or they're not going
Yeah.
through something that I'm going through, And so asking for help has been a challenge for so many of us. And so, you were able to you reached a point where you were like, I don't know, I don't understand what's going on with me. I'm not feeling well, and I need help. And so, you were able to navigate out of that through asking for help. So let's talk about like, maybe other ways that you've seen yourself, that you've been able to ask for help from your community, how community actually supports you in getting to where you are now.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. So the first thing and I always have like before we start, like, I feel like I always, I did so much work in my master's program to understand like the whys of why this happens. Right. And coaches don't miraculously help you. It starts because you were ready to take action.
Yes.
And
100%.
Right. Now, there are coaches who can help people who are not realizing they need help, get help. But typically you, the client, the viewer, there's something that you want to change, it starts with you, right? It starts with you. There's this
100%.
auto motivation. So behavior change only sticks if it was like that seed that you planted, like, I get to grow this now. Because there's a difference of, like, we always joked in my master's program, like, well, it's different than if, like, well, my wife tells me I gotta lose weight, or like my girlfriend tells me I gotta stop smoking cigarettes. That won't stick, because it's external motivation. And if that relationship dies or it doesn't go well, then you don't get to keep that. But when you plant that seed in your own heart and your own soul that I want to change, that's when you begin to see the self-compassion model come in, where you're like, okay, I'm not going to judge myself because I need help. Who can I reach out to? How can I see this in a different way?
Yes.
And so, getting help starts with your desire to change. And so I would say, first, if you're not reaching out for help, ask yourself, what's in the way of you receiving the support, or you believing that you deserve the support? Because once again, I said it before, life is a team sport. You're not here to do it by yourself. We are a collective. Yes, we have our own wants and desires and purposes, but in this lifetime, when people really get to the consciousness of we're working together, it goes better. And so, like, an easily tangible example of how it gets better in community was last year around the end of April. So we're approaching the 1-year mark of my sister having a really terrible car accident.
Yes.
And it was really difficult because she, for probably a month to month and a half, she was not in her right mind, literally.
You had a
Part of,
TBI, right?
huh?
You had a TBI.
Traumatic brain injury, correct. And she was not fully there. Like, for the first few days, she was like Drew Barrymore in 51st Dates, where she would wake up and not know what happened, and every day was like the same thing for a while. And she's fully, for anyone watching, she's fully 100% better now. But there were people in her inner circle who were not prepared, who did not have the tools to support her. But because I had my master's, I'm like, okay, like you said before, like, we think, like, if it's going to get done, we got to do it ourselves. So I had that mentality in the beginning, because I'm like, I have a master's in health and wellness coaching. I really know how to program her brain. I know how to support her. I know how to bring in foods that will, like, make her brain be supported. And I was doing it all because everyone around me and everyone around, well, not everyone, but I'm, as a sister, I'm going to take the lead.
Yeah.
And I found that about a week to 2 weeks in, I was like, I was going crazy. My body was shutting down. My body was hurting. I couldn't sleep, but I needed to sleep. I wasn't able to do my own work. And things were beginning to break down. So I was being stretched thin. And then I was able to call upon her friends. So we had friends, some of her friends, and I was like, oh, I don't have to do this by myself. I'm going to call this person, see what they can do, how they can contribute. And then people started reaching out. Like, I started sharing on social media her journey, and people were shouting out and giving resources. People were pitching in saying, I can do this for you, for her. And it got to the point that by sharing, when we share our stories, people become connected. Because people love my sister, they were like, okay, I can help you with these things. Like, things that I didn't even realize I needed help in. People were reaching out and say, hey, you're probably not thinking of this, but I can take this off your plate. And that made the load exponentially lighter.
That's amazing. I love that story. And, to touch on something you mentioned earlier, which was with your overcoming your struggle with money and your relationship with money.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes as people, we're going through cycles and patterns of the same thing going over and over and over again. So Einstein has an amazing quote that I always use, which is, the mind that made the problem is not the same mind that's going to bring the solution.
Right.
I'm probably,
No, yeah.
the quote, but that's basically the gist of it. And so what makes you think, if you've been doing the same thing you've been doing over and over and over again, and you repeating this pattern, and you want it to change, but you don't have the tools in you, you don't have whatever it is that you might be missing, or, it's not that you're missing anything. It's just that there might be another way to do something and another possibility that you might have that you might not be aware of that someone else does. And so even in your money story, you reached out to someone that, you thought that maybe had it more together, or that, had something else that you didn't know, and you reached out, and that's how you were able to break the cycle and break the pattern. And then here again, you find yourself in the situation where you dove in, you were like, I'm going to help my sister, I'm going to do everything. And you did it from a very good place in your heart. But at the same time, you're only one human being, you can only do so much. And so you were like getting stretched again. And so, this whole thing about wanting to do it ourselves. And it's like, you don't have to, you really don't have to. So I love that you've actually experienced that, and you've actually come to the other side of it.
Totally. If I didn't ask for help, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I would have broken down. And I'm going to say this, I would have broken down, and I wouldn't have been upset about it, because I would have seen that I did it. I broke down because I didn't ask for help. I think when you get to the place of, so resiliency or resilience, however we call it, resilience, when you experience the stress enough, you're going to get to the point where instead of being overcome by the stress, you're going to say, oh, what did I miss in this one? Like, you're not gonna say that during, but you're gonna come out of it and be like, oh, what didn't I learn in that one? Okay, I get to not do that next time, because now I know what that feels like.
Exactly. Once you've experienced the pattern enough, and it'll happen the first time, you won't even notice it. It'll happen the second time, you'll see, oh, wait, this happened to me once before, but you'll still just kind of keep going autopilot. It'll happen a third time, and you'll say, wait a minute, this happened to me last time, and it happened to me another time before. And then you start connecting the dots until it happens to you enough where you get to that point, like you said, you had no other way, you had no place else to go. Like, there was no turning back. Like the person, for you to transform something in your life, you have to be a fuck yes. You have to want it so badly, because you have to know that going back to how your life is not going to work for you. Going back to that abusive job that you had was not an option for you. So you had to figure out a way to get out of that. And so you became resilient, and you didn't allow it to break you, And so it's like when the ships are burned behind you, there's a story. I don't know if you know it, about the naval captain.
No.
There's this famous battle. I don't even know where the battle is or where it took place. And they come to the beach, and they're outnumbered. They know they're outnumbered going into the battle, but they get there anyway. And the captain says, okay, archers, turn around and hit the ships. And they're like, what do you mean hit the ships? We're going to burn down our own ships? And he's like, yeah. So they burn down their own ships. And he's like, so now we have no other choice but to survive getting off this island. And they ended up winning the battle. So it goes to show, when the ships are burned behind you, like there's no other way. You got to make it happen.
There's more of an impetus to do it.
Exactly. And so, wow, how incredible. I love what you're sharing. So after everything you've learned in your journey, you've overcome these obstacles, you've stretched your rubber band and come back even stronger. From what you've learned in this journey, where do you see yourself going from here? Like, where do you take this resilience, and how do you keep it going?
So like for me, like so many things pop up. Like for me, I am committed to showing other people the magic of resilience. Like I think going from here is showing other people that there's always a possibility. And I think about it, I think, one of the things that I tell a lot of my clients is something that I learned from a Teal Swan video. I don't know if you've ever heard of Teal Swan, but she had a great video like a long time ago when she first started, about bad days, which is really what creates the framework for resilience, right? Like you're not resilient if you didn't have a bad day. And I always loved the way she put it. She's like, imagine that those bad days and those bad experiences are like waves in the sea. And we're all waiting, like we see the wave, and a lot of us are waiting for the wave to hit us. And when we learn to have a new relationship with the waves, we actually begin to learn to ride the wave rather than to let it hit us. And so what's next for me is to continue being in the process of experiencing waves, but continuing, or but to keep on riding them, and not over identify when one hits me and I didn't expect it, because that is the relationship to resilience. That's the relationship to stress. That's a relationship to bad days. That's a relationship to the waves. The waves are never going to stop. The waves in the ocean are never going to stop. The same goes for bad days and difficult situations. It is creating new relationships to your experience, to these experiences, so that you can really continue to be who you came here to be, and not be defined by being, knocked down by a wave.
I love that. That's incredible. And it's funny because it leads me to the next thing that I was going to talk about, which is something I found on your website because I was like stalking you before we did our interview, which was you had this beautiful quote that said, "Hearts are broken to allow the light to flood through the cracks." And boy, do I have a lot of light to share with you. And it says, and you said, it wasn't until life happened that I had the chance to see it in action and learn the lessons that came with pain and struggle.
Yeah.
So what comes up for you when I read that back to you?
So astrology starts coming up into my mind because I have so Scorpio, like I was thinking like Scorpio, like everyone thinks about Scorpio being so dark and so goth, and I do love like the aesthetic of that. But a lot of people, the reason I bring that up is because Scorpio in astrology, one of the things that it represents is the shadow work. And there are a lot of people that are like, oh, positivity, happy, joy, don't be negative, which I can get down with, because we do need to adopt a more positive outlook, but we cannot bypass, we cannot ignore the shadow. And until you've seen your shadow, you witnessed your shadow, you've actually integrated your shadow into your experience. You can't. That's like the crack in the light in the heart. Like if you don't have the break through the darkness, the light can't come through. If you don't witness your shadow, you can't access the joy. You can't access your gifts. Like these experiences that create resilience are actually where we discover our gifts, where we maybe actually can have a spotlight. This is what you're supposed to do, right? Sometimes and so Scorpio is also about transformation, to really be the new person. Like sometimes, I was going to be on a very specific career path that I was good at, but like I would come home and feel nothing at the end of the day. Even though I literally transformed thousands of people's lives with that work, I didn't feel fulfilled. And now I've touched only the beginning of, a handful of souls, but I feel so powerful. But it took the transformation of being in the dark to get that shift to where I needed, that redirect, the transformation from one experience to another, from one Ilona to another, from one career to another, to be in my purpose.
Incredible. Incredible. And, God, there's so much in there that I want to unpack. Because even, that's one of the premises, the things that I live by in my work, which is to embrace the shadow, to integrate the darkness, to
Yeah.
really embrace the light and self-expression and creativity and the feminine, the masculine, to really, embrace that. The darkness dwells in the feminine and the feminine energy. And we tend to shy away from the darkness in society. Like we think the darkness is bad. Don't go into a dark room. It's scary. Like when in reality, the darkness is where creation happens. Like the womb is dark, like soil where the seed grows is dark. Your mind, when you're dreaming, it's dark, and you're sleeping and you're having all these dreams and all these awakenings. So it's like we tend to shy away and be scared of the darkness. But in reality, when we embrace the darkness, we're able to see the light. So that's just so incredible. So fast forward a little bit, and this will be the last kind of maybe tidbit from your life that we'll take, because you, or maybe not fast forward, maybe it's rewind, but I'm not sure, but you had a very, very powerful experience in your life in reference to someone very special to you that you lost. And you mentioned it when we were getting ready to prepare for the interview. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share that and how you overcame that and where it brought you to.
Well, yeah, and I get emotional, and I'm not ashamed to get emotional, but like I saw my dad die. I saw him lose consciousness. We watched him be in a coma. We watched him take his last breath 4 years ago in January. And for people who have close family relationships or close friend relationships, any loss is a test of resilience as well, because some people in the face of death, not their own, but someone else's, and even in their own, will break down and stay in the breakdown because their attachment to that person is so strong that they can't overcome. They're not resilient to overcome the attachment. And when you said, like, what are the things that you learned or helped you get through that, I will never forget that at the moment of my father's passing, I remember I was always called the emotional one in my family. Like, everyone was like, you're so emotional, you cry all the time, everything, you're so sensitive. And while my dad was dying, everyone, well, it was just my siblings and my mom and I, so it was just literally immediate family, they were all in breakdown, which is normal. So I'm never going to tell someone don't be in breakdown, but I remember thinking, why am I so calm? Why am I so clear? Why am I feeling in control? And I remember that my college semester had just finished, my first semester of grad school, and I had spent 15 weeks meditating. And I remember thinking, wow, when you really connect with your inner self, you can even face fear with calm. I mean, death with calm. Like, I was sad, but I was not freaking out. My mom was freaking out. My brother was like, who's very controlled, like he was overcome with emotions, because I think he hadn't been faced with that level of emotion. My sister was a mess. Like, it was just a lot. And I remember thinking, I'm very sad, but I feel so solid. I don't want to say strong because that's not the word, but like so secure that I was going to be okay. And I think one of those things that resilience teaches you, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a loss of a loved one, whether it's credit card debt, whatever it is, it teaches you, what are you capable of? It all goes back to the you. We're in this together, but it teaches you, what is my role? What is my responsibility? How am I showing up? What am I doing? Who am I? So there is a self-directed reflection in resilience. Like, you get to understand who you are and how you're showing up in the world, because then you get to take that out into the world with others.
And so for you, what was that thing that helped you get through that? Because that was probably one of the darkest times in your life.
I think meditation helped me get through that specific day. And then having the tools of mindfulness, right? Not over identifying. I will also say, like, people reaching out, like, people like love, like, you get to remember you're not alone. I think sometimes when death happens, you're so focused on the person that you've lost that you forget that there's a network around you that still cares for you, that's still there for you, that is going to be moving forward with you. And, the other thing is the idea of, also for me, another thing was really spirituality, really was an enhanced experience for me, because I'd read books about what happens in the afterlife, or the possibility. And I remember thinking, if I get to test my belief, and my belief is that we don't end here. We have an infinite spirit. And I remember having mental conversations with my dad, like, you know what? It's okay for you to go. You don't have to stay for us in that body if you're not well. And I remember having these conversations that gave me peace. Like, actually having a conversation with my dad gave me the peace of the continuity of the spirit, which I know for some people is like next level, but that brought me peace. And it's really interesting how that comes full circle, because I was having those conversations with my dad in my mind, and I hadn't told anybody. And about almost 4 months ago, I had a friend who was a medium tell me, oh, your dad's thanking me for letting him go. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, he's showing me how, like, you were telling them he can go, and that's why he was able to go in peace.
Wow.
And so your belief system, so I'm not saying it doesn't have to be religious, it doesn't have to be esoteric, it doesn't have to be woo, whatever you want to believe. But I believe that we are not mortal. Like, our body is mortal, but our spirit is bigger. And when you can really ground into that, and I'm getting emotional because it's hard. We've been conditioned to think this is it.
Yeah.
And even in that, and even that created resilience, right? Like even that made me think, this isn't it.
Yes.
Like there, what makes me is not going to end here. And so all of these things that have held me back and made me feel embarrassed and made me feel less than, from that moment, no longer mattered. And I ended up quitting my job. I ended up going all in for grad school. I ended up moving from where I'm living to help my mom. I literally I shed. I had the resilience to say, I don't have to live the life that doesn't fit me anymore, and step into the life that I wanted to create. So it's taken 4 years to get to here, because I mean, I didn't even really leave my last job until July of 4 years ago. So it's not even 3.5 years fresh of being in the mindset of an entrepreneur. And I really didn't do that for more than a year and a half now, but like, gives you the ability to stretch into what you get to do. And so believing in that there's more than to life than this, and that these tools, these internal knowledge practices, will build you up. You get to build yourself up from the inside and not from the outside.
Oh, beautiful. And as you were speaking just now, I had the vision of the phoenix who rises from the ashes. So there's this, like, it's a mythological story. It's an ancient story. It's been around for, eons of time, and it's a story about the phoenix who catches fire. I think, I don't know why it caught fire. It catches fire, it burns, and then it rises from the ashes. And so, from your father's death, from one of the darkest periods of your life, losing someone so close to you, you were able to come out of that and just completely shed the things that weren't serving you anymore and recreate yourself and recreate your life. So, wow, that's.
And it was a choice. And I have to say, it's a choice. We actually have a mutual friend, Paloma Dueñas, who, after my dad died, my mom and I found her randomly. So it's such a coincidence. We got to meet her in different ways.
Paloma, shout out. We love Paloma.
Yes, Paloma. And she said something that will always stay with me, because she had suffered loss. And she said, when a loved one leaves, because they are part of us, and they return to source, if you believe in, or God, or whatever you want to call it, they're returning to love, the highest frequency of love. And so the ones who are left behind can choose to upgrade their frequency, because it's almost like when you have a loss like that, they're raising their frequency. You are given access to raise it too, or you can choose to say, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, because you go into the depression, the sadness, the lower vibrations.
And once again, it's not to say you don't get to process grief,
Right.
but it's not uncommon for people who suffer loss of the loved one to have life completely changed, new job, new relationship, new money, new things, because there are boosts to higher frequency.
Yeah.
And it was a choice. I chose.
And you chose to allow the conversation with your father to continue.
Yeah.
Which was beautiful. And then you received that confirmation last year that the conversation has been being heard. Amazing, 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 amazing. Wow. What an amazing story. I know, I don't know, I don't want to say I hope, because I know that our viewers have gotten so much inspiration from this for your own journeys. So please post comments, post questions below. We'll circle back and answer them. But before we wrap up, and just one more thing, one more question for our viewers, if you'd indulge us, Ilona, you've been so amazing and so open and vulnerable. I so appreciate it. What words of wisdom would you like to leave our viewers who may be on a similar journey or on a journey of resilience and could use your words?
Oh gosh, I feel like there's so much I could say. And I think the first thing that comes up, for like when you ask that question, the first thing that downloaded was, you are not alone, and you are more than this body.
Mm. Yes.
You are not alone. We are all connected. Like, if you want to get nerdy on a quantum physics levels, we are just a composite of atoms in the quantum field, and we're all connected. We just can't see it because we don't see it at that frequency.
And just because we have these spacesuits doesn't mean that I'm disconnected from you or separate from you or vice versa.
Yeah. We're not alone. And you are more than this body. You're more than this body. You're more than the things you think you are. And when you choose to wake up to how grand and powerful and sovereign and magical you are, you will see the magic even in your darkest of times.
Oof, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. You guys heard it here.
And it's 555 synchronicities. Yay.
It's 555. We're wrapping this up with this amazing, powerful conversation that I hope you received so much value out of it for your lives, and that you can take these things and practice them in your life, and rewatch the video and take notes and really implement a lot of these tips that Ilona mentioned here, because it's just, resiliency is really about being connected to what matters to you in your soul and your heart, and really stepping into that, stepping into your greatness, stepping into what matters to you, and creating the life that you want. And so with these interviews and with the work I'm doing with the self-love program coming up on April 19th, and my rebirth retreat coming up in the fall in Sedona, this is what I do. This is what I'm passionate about, what I'm dedicated to doing, which is really allowing women to access your resilience, to embrace the shadow in order to see the light, to harmonize your feminine and masculine energies, to access self-love deeper than you've ever accessed it before, and to heal your inner child. And so with that, I want to just thank Ilona for taking her time today to be here with us, to share so vulnerably and openly her journey, to empower us, to support us, to inspire us. If you're interested in her work, please, 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 please follow up with her. She is incredible. You will not be disappointed with the type of work that she does. She does astrology readings, all kinds of stuff. And she's just a beautiful light being and light worker on this planet. And I'm so honored to be able to collaborate with you, to work with you, to talk with you, to spend time with you. And I thank you for all your gifts. So guys, thank you so much. With love and light, I hope you have an amazing day, and tune in. On Friday, we'll have another interview at 5 p.m. Oh no, actually Thursday we'll have one at 1 p.m. and then Friday at 5 p.m. So keep tuning in, keep leaving your comments and questions below. We'll be answering them. And for now, I will send you love and light. Thank you so much. And keep being resilient. Bye.